Right, so that is how Israel votes. Let's talk about what's happening on the ground a little more with my colleague Daniele Pagani. Our West Asia Bureau Chief is joining us live from Tel Aviv in Israel. Good morning, Daniele. It's a long day ahead for you. Let's start with what's happening on the street there. How excited are people about this vote, and what are the chances for the two Benjamins?
Well, I would say that the elections are occupying every space in the public discourse, in pubs, in restaurants, in cafes, and even here in Tel Aviv on the beach. While people are running in the morning, they're talking about the elections. It is a very, very tough election for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, I beg your pardon. And there is a sense of really not being decided. Many of the voters I had the opportunity to speak to yesterday did not know who to vote. And it was yesterday, and they were voting today. So many also told me off the records that they were going to decide who was actually their candidate while they were walking into the voting station. So this gives us the sense of how much of a tough election Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was fighting. We've seen that yesterday he rallied upon his supporters, telling them that there is a concrete and actual risk of him not being re-elected. So he feels the pressure, he knows that he can actually lose the election, and even if he wins, he would win by a narrow margin. So he would have to work very hard to form a complicated coalition where even very small parties will have a very big say.
All right, that's interesting. And, you know, there has been rumor about, or rather suggestions, very clear ones, that this is a referendum on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Do you think that that is perhaps what has prompted him to go into territory that he hasn't earlier, making statements such as promising the annexation of Israeli settlements in the West Bank?
Certainly, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to go all out and way beyond his way to try to secure a fifth mandate. This would make him the longest-serving Israeli Prime Minister, which is definitely a badge of honor here, and also will protect him eventually from the trials that he needs to face of corruption and bribery. He can manage to vote a law and to protect himself through some sort of rules that in Israel are available for prime ministers and not to be eventually indicted in members of parliament. This is one thing. The other thing is that if he loses, these may well be the end of his political career, but it is worth reminding that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu survived even toughest elections. There were moments in his political career where everyone would have bet any sum of money that this was the end of him, but he is very resilient and his voters anyway support him. He does enjoy a very large support. Many of the people I have spoken to told me that anyway they see him as the only possible prime minister that Israel has. He's very well known all over the world. He is very close to Washington and very close to the current United States president, and he presented both the Golan Heights and the moving of the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv, where I am right now, to the contested city of Jerusalem as his own personal successes. Therefore, he does still enjoy a very, very large support. But also Benny Gantz enjoys the support of many of the cities in Israel, particularly in Tel Aviv. Many of the people tells me that they want change, they want a change of guard, and they are ready to give Benny Gantz the possibility to actually win these elections.
All right. Coming back to Netanyahu, though, you spoke about his warm ties with the United States, but he's also maintained a very strategic relationship with Russia. Has that balancing act in some ways between, the U.S. and Russia also been one of the key points of his foreign policy, something that will hold him in good stead when people, especially undecided voters, go in today to cast their vote?
Definitely, yes. So when it comes to the relations with Washington, it is clear and open that Netanyahu is perhaps the closest ally that President Donald Trump has. President Trump said that both of the candidates are good people, quoting him, but he would rather have Netanyahu in place. Remember, there is the deal of the century which is coming up, and therefore it's easier to manage it with a person that you already know. Continuity in politics is always good when it comes to foreign policy and bilateral relations. Netanyahu has been very, very able to manage also a very balanced relations with Russia, particularly when it comes to Syria and when it comes to convincing and requesting Russia to handle the fact that Iran has a vast presence in Syria. Netanyahu and Israel, they're very clear when it comes to that. They requested Russia, please keep Iran out of our way. Whenever you don't, we are going to strike them. And this is actually what is happening. Prime Minister Netanyahu is a good architect of the no chaos politics, no chaos policy, which in Israel is very important. Whatever happens, there should not be chaos, not to the north, not to the south, and not to the east.
Right. We've got live visuals on our screen of some of the polling booths where people have already lined up to cast their vote. Daniele, stay with me a while longer. Let's talk a little bit about also what the opinion of Palestinians is about this election. Remember, very little happens in Israel without the Palestinians having an opinion on that. Now that Israel is going to the polls, what exactly do they think, especially those in Gaza and the West Bank, about this exercise? We on World is One's Daniele Pagani brought us this report. Take a look.
Palestinians do what they always do when their neighbors cast the vote. They wait and watch. They do not believe anything would change for them.
About the Israeli election, to be honest, each one is worse than the other. Each one has made a mark on the history of the Palestinian people. Netanyahu or Barak, each one has committed war crimes against the Palestinians. Each one of them is a war criminal. It doesn't mean anything to me. It doesn't change anything, the Israeli election. I'm still under the occupation and any government in charge will be the same. It's only a different head on the same coin.
In the Gaza Strip, caught on the grip of a full Israeli land, sea and air blockade, the Palestinians are even more unconvinced.
Since the day we were expelled from our land in 1948, we have always been hearing promises from the Israeli officials, but they do nothing for our benefit. They take away our rights and oppress us.
100% they have agreed to end the case of refugees or even to eliminate the Palestinian nation. This nation is a poor nation. No one takes care of it. They are trading in our plight. This Trump is a monster. He is destroying our cause and might give all of the Gaza Strip to Israel. That won't be a surprise.
The officials of Hamas, which rules Gaza, go so far as to dismiss the Israeli election as an internal matter of little or no relevance to the Palestinians.
We are not interested in the internal Zionist elections because it is an internal Zionist matter. We don't differentiate between one side or another. Whether left or right, they all agree on confiscating Palestinian lands and not recognizing the basic rights of Palestinians. Also, everyone conspires in our case. We have experience with all of them, and when it comes to the Palestinian cause, they are all criminals, terrorists and occupiers. Therefore, we don't count on any of those Zionists. They are an occupation that should vanish from our Palestinian land.
Some other Palestinians see themselves only as an electoral topic which Israeli politicians use to forge a consensus.
I think there is no positive side to any candidate in the Israeli election. Today, Palestinians are like a product in the Israeli election market. Not for pursuing peace with the Palestinians and thus living in security, but on the contrary, in order to kill Palestinians and oppress them further.
Officials from the West Bank headquartered Palestine Liberation Organization echo their compatriots' skepticism. They say that whatever be the outcome, the chance of opening a fruitful dialogue remains slim.
Well, we don't have any high expectations or positive expectations from the Israeli elections. Very clearly, the whole political terrain in Israel has shifted to the right and to the extreme right and to the racist right, to the point where there is no room for any parties or coalitions that are whether left-wing or at least committed to a just peace.
Numbers seem to have proven Hanan Ashrawi right. A recent survey found that only 12% Jewish Israelis identify themselves as left-wing, whereas 56% define themselves as right-wing. Palestinians know that neither Netanyahu nor Gantz favor an independent Palestinian state. Even when Netanyahu or Gantz talk about a Palestine state, it is at best a small, demilitarized state. Neither has any intention of preventing Israeli settlements from mushrooming and expanding on Palestinian land.
When it comes to Palestine, they are very much right. Mr. Benny Gantz does not hold a more open position. It would have been different if perhaps the Labour Party in Israel would have been stronger than this, but this is definitely not the case, and it seems all set for one of the two main rivals, Benjamin Netanyahu and Benjamin Benny Gantz, to become the Prime Minister of Israel. So for Palestinians, there is absolutely no hope of seeing a big turn of events. Daniele Pagani reporting from Jordan for VO World is One.
Right, let's go back to Daniele Pagani on that factor. Daniele, is it a given in many ways that the status quo towards Palestine is going to continue no matter who comes to power? And does that also feature as a factor in how people will choose to vote today?
Yes, definitely. As you can imagine, Palestine, the relations with the Palestinians, the peace process, which has been frozen since 2014, has a very prominent position within the electoral discourse. But as you correctly pointed out, it doesn't matter the outcome because both of the candidates do share a very similar approach when it comes to the relations with both the West Bank and Gaza. Maybe Prime Minister Netanyahu, we can say, has been more tolerant when it comes to Gaza. Benny Gantz is saying, at least when it comes to his rallies and his election speeches, that he intends to go hard on Gaza and to be tougher than Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. But many see this only as an electoral promise because at the end of the day, no one in Israel, there is no Israeli citizen who really wants an all-out war against Palestinians. But certainly there is no space for a two-state solution or a one-state solution. That is not on the table, at least as of now, and at least not on the table of the two main contenders. There can be talks, there can be agreements, but there is no foreseeable Palestinian nations, at least in the near future.
All right, we leave it at that for now. Daniele, thanks very much for bringing us up to speed this morning from Tel Aviv. We'll, of course, reach out to you during the day at different points to get more of a sense of how the election is panning out. Remember, it's a single day of voting for Israel. It's a single constituency also. Everyone's vying for those 120 seats in the Knesset. Who's going to make it is a big question right now. Two Benjamins in the fray. Which one is it going to be? Now, remember, this is the second election in just 4 years after under pressure Prime Minister Netanyahu called early polls. A victory will make him the longest serving Israeli Prime Minister and a defeat could end his career. Here's a look closer at Benjamin Netanyahu.
Benjamin Bibi Netanyahu has held the position of Israel's Prime Minister since 2009. But he faces a tough election this year. Israel goes to the polls on the 9th of April. A victory would make him the longest-serving Israeli Prime Minister. A defeat could end his career. Israel's Attorney General is preparing to indict Netanyahu for corruption. But Netanyahu remains defiant and combative.
אני מתכוון להמשיך לשרת אתכם ואת המדינה כראש הממשלה עוד שנים רבות. אל תאמינו לכל הספינים.
Where did Bibi's political career start? And what are his political beliefs? Benjamin Netanyahu was born in Tel Aviv. He lived in the United States when he was a teenager, but returned to Israel as an 18-year-old to serve in an elite commando unit. He fought in Lebanon and the 1973 Arab-Israel War. Netanyahu entered politics in 1976 after his brother was killed in a raid while rescuing hijacked Israeli hostages in Uganda. Netanyahu used a network he built while studying in the US to forge his public persona. He became one of Israel's main international advocates.
The forces of fanaticism.
In 1984, his efforts gained him the prestigious position of Israeli ambassador to the United Nations. In 1988, Netanyahu became a lawmaker from the right-wing Likud party. He knew how to play politics and in 1992 became the party's secretary. But Netanyahu was more ambitious than that. In 1996, he ran for Prime Minister. Israeli political veterans laughed at him, but he proved them wrong. Netanyahu beat Shimon Peres to become Israel's youngest prime minister. It was a difficult mandate. Netanyahu spent more time managing political infighting rather than developing the country. This cost him a re-election. He left politics for a while, but returned to work under Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, only to quit again in 2005 in protest against the decision of a full Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. Netanyahu has lately been criticized for being too tolerant of the escalation in hostilities with Gaza. But it is worth remembering that under his leadership, Israel fought 2 wars against the Strip in 2012 and 2014, when Israeli forces killed 2,100 Palestinians and lost 67 of its own soldiers. Netanyahu sees himself on the right wing of the political arena. Netanyahu has always supported expansion of Israeli settlements on Palestinian land. He believes Israel is a Jewish state and negates the possibility of an independent Palestinian state, which he thinks would turn into a potential hotbed for militant Islam. Netanyahu's strongest card is his international network and particularly his long-standing friendship with the United States. After a difficult time with Barack Obama, Netanyahu found in Donald Trump an overly pro-Israeli president.
That the United States will withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal.
Trump withdrew from the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, which Netanyahu opposed. Trump declared Jerusalem as Israel's capital, cut all American funds to the Palestinians, and signed a decree recognizing the occupied Golan Heights as Israeli territory.
Today, the embassy of the most powerful nation on earth, our greatest ally, the United States of America, today its embassy opened here.
These are all successes Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu can present as his own, and it may just help him overcome his latest challenge.
Benjamin Netanyahu is working very hard in order to consolidate a coalition which will possibly allow him to win and become therefore the longest Israeli serving prime minister. This is a very, very tough election for a man who has been ruling over Israel for now more than a decade. Daniele Pagani reporting from Amman for VION World is One.
That's a wrap.